The stereotype that a lot of people have, government is not entrepreneurial and private sector is more entrepreneurial. I actually found a lot more entrepreneurial spirit when I moved to government than when I was in private sector.
The UAE are doing an amazing job at this already. They have implemented programs to involve and keep the younger generation involved. Look, just last year during the World Government Summit that the UAE host every year, where they launched a program for the younger generation to be part of the policy decision making. And it was just a few years ago, it was the UAE government also that mandated people under 30 to be on all federal boards. Just shows you how forward-thinking the UAE is in terms of engaging the youth in decision making.
You highlighted one thing. It's the fact that you try to push AI into everything. Do you believe that AI is something that's, becoming more of a forceful layer that people are adding on to things?
Yes, it is something that quite dominates the scene. And we've learned through meeting countless founders that the moment someone pushes AI, you should put a few red flags up.
AI is actually not new. Been around for a long time. We've been using it in our day-to-day lives for a very long time.
Do you see the problem-solving capacity or the capabilities separate when it comes to the younger generations?
Definitely, but for the positive.
Are there any specific stuffs that, even we need to introspect into and we need to kind of, brush it up a bit?
I'm managing a team of three Gen Zs, and they tend to shy away from confrontation.
Although they're very vocal about their opinion, they shy away from confrontation. That's very interesting.
Let's say if Dubai were a startup, what would its tagline be?
I would say it's constantly reinventing itself. I would say it's sort of like AI, where it just got resurgent again and again and again.
What's a tech trend or policy idea you think it will completely change the game in 10 years?
I'd say...
Welcome to the Z-Way. So today we have quite an interesting panel with us here, right here. It's quite a mix of people. Obviously, you know me and Soumana, but we have Ghaith, who's a senior manager at the Dubai Future Foundation. He's previously been with PwC and also the government of Dubai. So he's been in the region for quite some time and also in the innovation ecosystem for quite time. We have Darine with us, who's joining Ghaith on the panel, and she's currently working in public policy. She's been at big tech, she's seen it all, and she's also primarily been in the UK driving impact, but more so across the Middle East in the UK, if I'm to say. And that's quite huge. You have had some quite interesting projects and stints that you have advised on, which is fascinating to see and obviously fascinating to hear about. Having said that, both of you are very deeply involved in the innovation ecosystem across the world, primarily the Middle East, but across every aspect that's, connected to the Middle East in some way or the other. So how would you say that the innovation ecosystem is specifically evolving when you see the generations of it and also for the future?
Darine, do you want to go first?
You go first.
No, please.
Being GFF, I'll let you go. I'll start until I ease into it a little bit.
So innovation is quite the catchy term. And unfortunately, a lot of people and a lot of, let's say, enterprise has used it to kind of sell image and sell brand. But when it comes to the nitty-gritty of it, it's about trying to find a way to do things a lot better and a lot faster. So it's about being agile, right? And the funny thing is that as innovative as corporates try to be, they're always outsmarted by smaller companies because they're really all about innovation and agility. And whoever drives these companies are young, hungry founders who find a small little corner in the industry that is not performing very well, needs a lot of innovation, and is typically ignored. And they go after them. And they're usually younger, right? And obviously hungrier. So a lot of the innovation that we've seen drive a lot of the key sectors here in Dubai, whether it's financial services, whether it's real estate, tourism, have been driven by young entrepreneurs who have been pushing the envelope on what needs to happen.
100%.
Yeah, so the misconception is that it's a lot of it is driven by tech. It's not.
Yeah.
Tech drives a lot of the how do we do things faster and better, but it's actually the smart young people who are pushing the boundaries of what business models should look like and how should they change. So that's what underpins innovation for the most part.
Makes sense. Yeah. It's mostly pain point analysis. Like you find a gap,
Correct.
you address it.
Correct. But the push later is, I want to pump this full of artificial intelligence or blockchain or what have you.
Yeah.
But that's not the solution, right? The solution is, for example, if you are a company that's trying to redefine real estate ownership with micro ownership, for example, how does that work technically? How does the regulator start regulating the ownership model? Who has more stake in that piece of real estate? How does it work versus one owner where it's very clear?
Yeah.
So you're changing the way that value is being exchanged. That's the real innovation.
Right.
Yeah.
Makes sense. So here you highlighted one thing which I got from what you said. It's the fact that you try to push AI into everything. So do you believe that AI is something that's, becoming more of a forceful layer that people are adding on to things just for the sake of it? It's not essentially solving the problem, or it's not essentially adding any value to the core proposition? Or is it not something that we have seen?
It's a bit of both. Yes,
Yeah.
it is something that quite dominates the scene, as opposed to recent tech like metaverse, for example, or blockchain, which I would say blockchain has a lot more potential in use cases. Metaverse was pretty early, very, very early and very nascent.
Right.
But even blockchain had a lot of potential use cases, but it wasn't as resurgent as AI is at the moment, which makes it even easier for people to push AI as this is our selling point.
Makes sense.
And we've learned through meeting countless founders and countless solutions, both from the region and from abroad, that the moment someone pushes AI at you from the beginning, you should put a few red flags up and really scrutinize the pitch. Because we know that it's a very easy way to sell things.
Right, makes sense.
And just to add to that, I think it was a little reminder that AI is actually not new, right? It's been around for a long time. We've been using it in our day-to-day lives for a very long time. I guess maybe the concept of generative AI is quite new, and that's what's being pushed across a lot more. But it has its pros and its cons in many senses, particularly coming from a policy side, policy regulatory side. But we can't dismiss the fact that it does make us work in a more efficient and more productive way. And we've seen this in such a short period of time in so many different apps. And I think, Ghaith, you touched upon something in terms of now the small, medium enterprises bringing this technology. I think quite a few years ago when we had, I'm the part of the millennials, and I was born in the internet boom, right? It was just a handful of technology companies that were creating these products and these services. Today you have various, the youngsters and as well as various companies that are developing these sort of technologies. So and a lot for the greater good. So there are pros and cons, of course.
And you've touched base on the policies, right? You've touched base on the emerging technologies. How do you in the policy making field think that you can really work on bridging the gap between generations with probably policies or frameworks that can be created that can make it easier for all the generations to follow, or for the future to look brighter?
Yeah, it's a great question. So actually, the not many people realize the importance of policy making and how it works and the process. So it's quite a lengthy process, and it goes from understanding the rationale and why you need this policy and what are you trying to solve, and do you really need to solve this issue, and then going to sort of what kind of strategies and approaches are you going to take, and then of course developing the policy itself, and then the implementation. And then, of course, you have to monitor and evaluate whether this policy is doing its job, right? If it's fit for purpose. So throughout this phase, one of the most important and critical things for a policymaker is the stakeholder engagement. So it's making sure you're sitting with the right people, whether that be, government entities, industry, or, Gen Y or Gen Z or whatever. It's a vast stakeholder. To ensure that policy, like I said, is fit for purpose and it's the closest to reality as possible. Because the last thing a government wants to do is implement a policy and then have to retract it several years later, or implement a policy that's taken years to develop and then it doesn't actually do what it's meant to do. So that stakeholder engagement I'm talking about, it already involves the youth. In the end of the day, when we develop policy, it is a lengthy process, as I said. It takes years. So the focus is long-term rather than short-term in most cases. And we know that these policies are going to impact the lives of our future leaders, which is the younger generation. So we do keep them in mind, whether it's during focus groups, throughout the policy making. And the UAE are doing an amazing job at this already. They have implemented programs to involve and keep the younger generation involved. So I think it was just last year during the World Government Summit that the UAE host every year, where they launched a program for the younger generation to be part of the policy decision making.
Yeah.
And it was just a few years ago, it was the UAE government also that mandated people under 30 to be on all federal boards, and of course with training and so on. But just shows you how forward-thinking the UAE is in terms of engaging the youth in decision making.
Yeah, very interesting.
True.
If you had a Ghaith, you work very closely with lots of generations, specifically maybe Gen Zs. I mean, for the leaders who are currently watching us and you work with diverse teams, what would be your advice, or what have you learned from working with these like multi-generations? Like the Z way speaks about creating impact for the generations. You come with first-hand experience into that field. What would you say, like you have learned, and what would you advise the rest of the leaders in looking at multi-generational teams differently?
Yeah, it's a good question. So from my early days, my first job, actually, I worked all the way with boomers all the way down to millennials, which were at that stage entering the job market, which sounds like a long time ago. So the key thing for me back then, at least, was really giving that younger crowd a space where they can kill their ideas by voicing them, and you kind of guiding them in a path where they vet their ideas, because if they have a lot of abundance of it's energy and ideas, right?
Okay.
So you need to channel that somewhere where you can, where they can either soundboard it somehow correctly, and you give them a method or a framework or a way of thinking where they can then take back and think, okay, how could I have thought about this differently? How could I have improved this if it got shut down? And then as I progressed in my career and I joined Dubai government, as an employee within the executive office or within DFF, you had a 20% responsibility of developing new ideas.
Wow.
Nice.
Constantly.
Wow.
And there's a constant and regular pitching session to ministers, whereby the best ideas within the organization go up to the ministers. And those ideas are the way that we sort of, get a sense of how our young employees are getting a sense of how our projects are being perceived, also being launched, and what really works and what doesn't.
Wow.
Right?
Okay.
So that's an avenue for us to say, okay, Krupa, you have a few good ideas, pitch them to me. Right? Give me an elevator pitch.
Makes sense.
Then if I like it, I tell you, develop a concept note of a few slides, then build on it, and then it becomes an actual project, right? That's one of the really good ways where you can channel that energy and make them feel validated, while at the same time giving them some tough feedback
and
challenges in their day-to-day that kind of gives them a reality sense that this is not just going to be ideation or not just going to be something that I sit and I think about ideas. I need to actually solve and problem solve. And if you remember, Krupa, the constant thing that we talked about was generating a group of people who are really good problem solvers, because you could place them pretty much anywhere, and they could problem solve, and they can get the context going. So for me, that was the most useful thing. I got very lucky because I had a manager in my early days who listened always, and she constantly encouraged ideas. Me not realizing that she shot down 9 out of 10 of them. She just did it very nicely.
She was just very good at doing that, right? So you were still motivated without feeling demotivated.
100%. And it was a very clever way of her to kind of get a younger group of people who are entering consulting, which is not a very easy job.
Yeah.
To become a bit more attached to their job. So she did a fantastic job at that, and that's what I carry through as well with my team.
That's like a huge valid advice for everybody out there, because we tend to just like think that these new generations are actually just spending time on social media or thinking outside the box without being very useful. But here they are; they're actually contributing to the economy. In my opinion, they play a huge role in that.
Yeah, but just take that for a second. I spent some time on TikTok, and I get bombarded with different different ideas. Not all of them are great, but just different things.
Yeah, of course.
But imagine how many they're getting bombarded with, and
Yeah.
they definitely
Yeah.
spend a lot more time on social media
Of
than
course,
we do.
of course.
I'm not saying that everything they get exposed to is correct or valid, but imagine how
Yeah.
much they get exposed to.
Yes,
If they're able to channel that into something productive, imagine how much they could benefit you and how much they can surpass you even. And it wasn't so long ago that the generation before us was saying the same thing about us.
Yes, yes,
Right?
absolutely.
Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah, yeah.
Especially if you
Because, yeah.
can integrate this with the experience of the old generation. I think together it's an amazing mix where you have the old generation, which have the history and the context and maybe a
Right.
bit more logical thinking. And then you have the younger generation who come with out of box ideas, creative ideas from, dare I say it, TikTok
Yeah.
or elsewhere. But that combination, I think, can really create sustainable and unique outcomes. So, yeah.
Yeah, and if the
Definitely.
leadership doesn't change, we're up to something that is going to be like not making an impact.
Exactly, because I mean, I'm guilty of through my experiences. At some point, you have a logical way of thinking, certain maybe limitations or biases maybe in your mind based on your experience. But I've seen sort of the younger generation; they're willing to take a bit more risks, and again think outside the box. So and I've been challenged by the younger generation myself. So yeah.
No, for sure. I completely agree to the point where you said, sometimes TikTok has better outcomes because honestly, it's all about exposure. And that's what I practice in my life too. And exposure is just not from the things that have been traditionally said to be right. It's from anything and everything that you do. So that's definitely there. But you mentioned a point, if I can circle back to it, which is that if you create problem solvers, you can fix them or you can put them in any place. So now that, especially you just mentioned you have worked with a lot of generations, you yourself are a millennial, do you see the problem solving capacity or the capabilities by itself separate when it comes to the younger generations? Do they have a different approach to problem solving vis-a-vis the older generations, or is that not the case? Have you noticed any sort of differences there?
Yeah, I mean, like I was just saying, definitely, and but for the positive, definitely not for the negative. As I was saying, we have our own limitations as being a sort of adults based on our own experiences, where I see the younger generation don't have. They can push our boundaries a bit more, make us think about things slightly differently. So I don't technically think it's a negative thing. I think if it's done correctly, the merge of the two can be very positive. So
So the lack of bias is something you feel which is a great point for us.
I think it's impossible to remove bias completely. Let's be honest with each
100%,
other, right? But it's things that we've learned. I mean, the older generation have learned with time that sometimes it's really hard to change the way we think and our approach.
True.
I think the younger generation are not afraid of just saying things how it is. I'll give you a small example. The other day I had a question from a friend of mine, and he asked me, and he said, I asked my daughter the same question. And it's something you get in one of those annoying consulting questions you get in the interview. And he said to me, if I have a 1 liter jug and I need to pour it into a small cup, how do you do it? And my head, being policy, being government, being consulting, I'm thinking of so many different scenarios and solutions. And he said to me, it's none of those. I thought, okay. And then his daughter, who's probably like 15 years old, said, well, you just can't. And he said, that's the correct answer. You don't have to overthink it. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. You just can't do it. Annoying as it is, it's the truth. And like I said, they're not afraid of speaking their mind.
Right.
So, yeah.
Yeah.
For sure.
They have two things that go really well for them. Number one is energy, right?
Yes.
No abundance of that. And I think they also have hunger. Hunger, which I think after a certain age and after being sort of taken through a career that is either grueling or very busy, you tend to lose parts of that hunger, right? You just want to focus on things that work.
Yeah, you want more stability, like your routine.
And also you choose your battles.
Yes,
They don't
100%.
choose their battles. They just want to fight on every single
Yeah.
front, right? Which is fantastic because you can give them that ground. They'll go and bang their heads against many, many walls, and they'll probably do it a lot better than you do, right? And then they'll come back and say, oh, here's what I've learned. I've learned that we can do 1, 2, 3 in a better way. Do you agree or do you not agree? So I think hunger is a fantastic and energy is a fantastic element that they have. It's a characteristic that I think is even millennials are slowly starting to lose that momentum.
Yeah.
And then the other thing as well is they crave that feedback to understand, is this how the world works? Because they, as Darine said, they question things we've taken for granted.
Yeah.
So when they come and they say, why?
Yeah.
Right? And to
Yes,
tell
of
another
course,
story
of
about
course.
my daughter, a friend of mine's daughter, her favorite word is why. Why is this here? Because I put it there. Why? Because I wanted to. Okay, but
Is he describing you?
I don't think so. I might have been there,
she's
but
4 years old, and then she just wants to ask why, right? He's driven out of his mind, so he tells me, let her ask you these questions.
Yeah.
And I get dragged into them, and I start explaining it to her. But then you start to realize that it's a very inquisitive mind.
Yeah.
She just wants to understand why. She doesn't really care how far the why
Yeah.
goes, right? She
It's
just
a
wants
dark
to
hole at the end.
exactly. So she wants to know why, and coupled with the hunger, it makes them unstoppable in terms of trying to understand how the world works. And I think that energy could be definitely leveraged.
for sure.
Yeah.
I want to ask Darine a question, maybe out of the blue. If you had like a red button that you can press on and you create like one policy that can just be like a policy that can just be for all multi-generational collaboration, one for all. You have the authority to just implement it. What would it be?
Wow, no pressure.
So we
there.
can just like get impact across generations all the way.
I'll give you an example of something that I went through and I gained a lot of experience out of. And I think if we use it similarly, maybe in a different context slightly, I think it would be very useful. So when I was at university, I took part in, I'm sure you guys have heard of it, it's called Model UN.
Yeah.
And it's sort of like a replica or a role play of the UN Assembly, right? So every student has given
A
a country,
country,
and it's taken very, very seriously.
Yes,
You don't
yeah.
go in
I
and just
know.
laugh. You have to come with real policies and proposals, right? But the approach and the whole experience taught me so many things. You know, the art of diplomacy, negotiations, understanding geopolitics and how things work. I think if we can do something similar here in the UAE, maybe on an emirate level, like have different groups from different emirates or different industries, like some from the healthcare, telecom, etc., and have multi-generations on these groups and see how they approach the issues. And maybe they might come up with solutions that can actually be practical and can be used in the country. So I think maybe something like that, I think would be quite useful. And,
So
and a fun way of
scalable.
learning as well.
Scalable problem solvers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Would you join?
That's
Definitely.
Maybe Ghaith will
I
go
missed
back
out on-
and implement this idea now.
I missed out on the Model UN, but
He's like,
I'll jump
he's
on
gonna
this.
model something like that.
no, that's a fun idea. I'll
Yeah, it's
take
very
part.
interesting.
Yeah,
Yeah, no, it's
definitely.
fantastic.
I'll be there.
Yeah.
So you spoke about something on the lines of, getting that experience from the grassroots level. So let's say the Model UN is something that we do at a university level, at a post-grad level. But what about when it comes to, actual decision making within the governments itself? Earlier you mentioned that, Dubai has implemented certain policies when it comes to having people under 30 at certain boards taking certain decisions. But have there been any instances that you remember or something that you can maybe throw a bit more light on, which has been tangible in terms of the impact that's come from, let's say, a younger generation within the government, or a policy that's come through that, something that we might have seen on, might have heard of, or might not have as well, but something that's out there in the world?
In terms of a tangible policy on top of my head, probably not.
Yeah.
But there are, like I said, various programs, and the UAE are working really hard to engage the youth. So I just gave you one program that's on top of my mind, but there are several, and not just in the UAE government as well. I've seen private sector, companies like PepsiCo, who actually and others actually give grants to youth to come up with solutions. I was part of one recently that came up with sustainable solutions, and I was in awe with the things that they came up with. Like, they were saying words I couldn't even pronounce.
Yeah.
So they've done amazing.
In terms of these like types of policies and procedures and the UAE,
Oh, I just
do you feel like they're like ahead?
Yes,
yeah.
for sure. And evidence of that is one thing. There's a minister of youth here in UAE.
Absolutely, yeah, of
And
course.
they are mandated to come up with these sort of policies. And there's a large youth population here in the UAE. And they're working, very hard to empower them and to upskill them and educate them to be the best of the future leaders. I'm sure you all know, the expectations of and the vision of the UAE leaders here are very, very high. Dare I say that we used to go to the West to look for best standards and see how they're doing things there and implement it here. But now I'm seeing the opposite. I'm seeing them come here and see what is the UAE doing and how are they doing it so fast. The UAE know and the leaders know that the younger generation are our future. And so, developing them and empowering them is going to be crucial.
And if there's a country that's outside UAE, let's say anywhere in the world, if you are to rank the top 5 or the top 3, no pressure at all, who do you see doing their best or putting their best foot forward in terms of policy making combined with the younger generations or combined with the youth?
That's a tough one.
I'm quite biased. So I grew up in London. Yeah. And I was engaged from a very young age in programs like this. Like Model UN was just one, but there were several. There were some in Parliament. There were some from a very young age, even from school, to start getting you to critically think about things, to understand how the system works, how policies are made. So I'm quite surprised that a lot of people still don't understand what policy is. True. Considering how important it is in decision making of governments around the world. So I would say UK, but I'm quite biased. So I don't know.
Honestly, I can't think of any country. I mean, Europe probably is a good benchmark, but where exactly, I can't honestly tell you. It's not something that I've been too exposed to. But to your point, I think the purpose of programs like this is to make a young person a lot more worldly about their thinking and about what they're exposed to, and you don't find that quite a lot, unfortunately, anymore. I remember my parents used to push us a lot to, for example, read something that's a little bit above our age, something that we're not really interested in, just to see if we'd grasp it or we'd be interested in it. But that's because they were trying to see if we have nodes of interest in different things that are not of our age group. And I don't see a lot of parents doing that, unfortunately. And I think programs like that give someone a massive advantage because it also helps them, it helps feed that curiosity early on, but it also helps them understand the system around them. I'm surprised as well when people don't understand the banking system, the financial system. Like, I'm not saying bank to bank or bank to B2B. I'm talking about your average B2C transactions, how do credit cards work, how do bank accounts work. Shocked. Not a lot of people understand
in terms of that knowledge.
Exactly. The concept of savings, where do you put your money, how, why, it's just not there. And it's very, very surprising. So I think things like that can really help people think about these questions a bit early on and start considering them.
And just to add to that, I mean, you made a really good point about, awareness raising. So again, just to add another comment about the UK is not many people realize that, any age, any background, you could speak to your local municipality and raise issues, and they actually go to Parliament. Very few people know this. I know that around the world there's a different system. It doesn't work, the same way. But, at a very young age, you know that you have a voice and your voice counts. And that's amazing.
Yeah. I want to take us away from government and policy back to probably what Ghaith does with the youth. I mean, I want to go back to the innovation, like you give them the space to do that. Corporates sometimes or multinational companies, international companies, like, okay, we have, it's in our values, we want people to be innovative. But in general, like, to really be able to have innovation as part of what you're currently doing on a day-to-day basis, it requires a lot of psychological safety. It requires people to be able to go into the leader's office and say, I have an idea, I'm going to be spending time on that idea versus like I'm being measured against KPIs, and to be able to manage new generations that adopt technology just very fast. There needs to be a lot of adaptability from the leaders who have been there for a very long time. What's your take on that psychological safety aspect to drive innovation?
Look, what the funny thing was that when growing up, and this is probably the the stereotype that a lot of people have, not just here but also globally, is that government is not entrepreneurial and private sector is more entrepreneurial, which is correct to a certain extent. I actually found a lot more entrepreneurial spirit when I moved to government than when I was in private sector. I launched around 7-8 projects from scratch when I was in government.
Wow. Okay.
0 when I was in the private sector. Simply because there were no avenues to do that. And there's many reasons for that. A lot of the nature of private sector here in enterprise, if it's not a national champion like the Emirates, the DP Worlds of the world, they're very transactional. In other words, they know they're here. It's a transient market, not a core market for them. So if everyone from the CEO down to the smallest employee know that there's some kind of revolving door here. So it doesn't drive innovation. It doesn't drive real innovation. And it's very incremental, right? Which is why when we start pitching on a government level, there are 3 horizons. There's things that we launch on His Highness level, on a city level, and then a DFF level, organizational level. And your pitch needs to match either one of these, and then you have to justify it. But that already gives you an idea of what success should look like, right? So thinking about it from that lens, even presenting to ministers, you have that avenue. If your idea obviously touches on a few checkpoints, but there's a training aspect to it. So I make sure that, for example, my juniors are there with me when I pitch or when we present and when we have feedback sessions, because I want them to be exposed to the kind of questioning and the environment early on.
You're making them ready, right? For
because
future questions.
Instead of me teaching them, quote unquote, something, I'd rather them have live experience of what it's like to be grilled on a certain slide or a business model or financial model. And I want them to see it, to know what to expect. So when they come to ask questions, the question is a lot more refined, but also they know what to expect. So I think involving them as much as you can, putting them in that deep end with you, it's absolutely critical. Otherwise, you're just going to end up lecturing them about what it looks like, but not actually taking them through it.
If you have one word that you can describe the multi-generational innovation ecosystem of the UAE, what would that word be?
Energetic.
Energetic.
Super. Yeah, because if you find the right type of, let's say, youngsters, but be it early millennials or Gen Z, and you put them in the right context, trust me, the energy is off the roof. And we've seen plenty of examples in that space. And obviously, I need to have a leader who's comfortable with dealing with that. Because unfortunately, not a lot of them are comfortable leading a younger team.
This is a very valid point, because there is that's my way, that's how we used to do it. The modern type of leadership is, and hence the Z way, because we've noticed that there is a gap in the way that the leadership is looking at the new generations. And it started with just an idea of reverse mentorship, right? Like Krupa you were also involved in that introduction, right?
He's the matchmaker
of a lot of others. So what can you learn from younger generations? And you can learn a lot. And there was that gap that we needed to be very vocal about this subject.
Look, it takes a lot of humility from an established leader to say that, forget about learning. There's something that this individual can give to my team, right? That humility alone is very difficult to get.
Yeah, thank you.
Couldn't agree more.
And then from the other side, so for example, I was talking to someone from Google the other day, and he was saying, I have a team of 5-6 people, and 4 of them are not showing up in the office as much as I'd like them to. They're doing their job. It's fantastic, but I want them to be exposed to the office environment. I'm happy for them to spend 3 days in the office and 3 days at home, 2 days in the office. But I'm finding that they're not willing to spend that energy here. They're available on calls. They meet their deadlines. They're fantastic. They get promoted. There's nothing wrong from a performance perspective, but they're not showing up. And he said, I need them to come back. Just to rub shoulders a little bit with their colleagues, with their seniors.
But it's his own need. That's the thing. It becomes very personal about how he is used to leading in the past.
But can I tell? I agree with him to a certain extent, because there's a type of experience that you get
when you're
from interacting with people.
Of course.
You cannot escape that, right? You can work 5 days a day from home. You could be an introvert for the rest of your life, but at the end of the day, there's a certain level of experience that you're not going to get if you're not in the office.
Of course,
right? So the aim is to get that flexibility to allow you to do that, but you need to also have that ownership from a young person to say, first, I need to deliver. That's the bottom line. That's why I'm here. And then second,
That's very interesting.
like, what can I do? Right? Because if you have that the humility plus the ownership, I think the team could work together.
Since we are talking about the flip side here, which I completely agree with, because even when we are doing this, I was very clear on one aspect. In fact, we were together clear on one, that it's not just the Gen Z who's the victim here. Every generation is, because it's not just you guys understanding us, it's us understanding you at the same wavelength and matching you there to create an impact. So since we are talking about the flip side, to the both of you, this question is being addressed. What do you feel the younger generations need to have in terms of capabilities to deliver the results that we just discussed early on in this episode, everything that we have talked about till now? Are there any specific stuffs that, even we need to introspect into and we need to kind of, brush it up a bit?
Great question. I mean, I'm going to be very honest and say, I mean, the Gen Z, Gen X and Y, I guess have the best of both worlds, because we were in that era of, we saw the internet boom, but we also saw the before that, right? So, I'll give you an example. When I was younger, to do my homework, I'd have to open an encyclopedia. Like there was no ChatGPT, there was nothing. It was that one book.
Do you still have some? I do.
Yeah, just for the memory. I haven't opened it in years. But to my point, I think we can't shy away from the fact that the times have changed, and that the new generation are not just adapting to technology like we were doing maybe in our generations, but they are driving the development of digital transformation, right? So having both sides, seeing the way we do things the older way, and seeing the transition with new apps, new technologies, and whatnot, I think we're able to see both sides of it and complement, right? And come up with outcomes based on that. I think the newer generation, as I was saying before, they are out of the box thinking. They come up with some really creative thoughts, and they come to problem solving with very fresh eyes. From my experience, where I've seen maybe the development is maybe on the managerial side, the leadership side. As Ghaith said, made a very good point about the interaction, the face-to-face, the diplomacy as well. I think in every industry, in every interaction you do, there is a sense of diplomacy, which you cannot learn on TikTok.
Yeah.
So that's what I think maybe we could help the younger generation.
Yeah, of course. There's a cross learning, like it's gonna be 360 degrees.
It's circular.
And there has to be a compromise or meeting in the middle. Yeah.
Darine mentioned a fantastic point, and I think on top of that is it's very easy for them to get, even for us, when with so much tech available, that you don't interact with a human being, right? Everything from ordering something to actually dealing with a complaint or working with someone, right? So it's very easy to get sucked into the non-personal side of things, but they're a lot more susceptible to it. So it helps to bring them closer to that interpersonal side if you're managing. So I'm managing a team of three Gen Zs, Gen Zers, and they tend to shy away from confrontation, and I push them.
Interesting.
I push
Plus
them.
one.
Okay. Although they're very vocal about their opinion, they shy away from confrontation. That's
They
very
do
interesting.
because so here's the problem, and I think
The face-to-face confrontation?
everything.
Or,
Most types of, and they're not introverts by any stretch of
it's
the
just
word.
the conflict awareness. I feel we are very conflict averse. Like I myself have a fight or flight response, and it's mostly flight.
Correct.
It's never flight.
100%. But it's I always tell them it's that rewarding feeling that you get after.
Yeah.
Right. But also it's one way to do it is to show them what's the worst that could happen. What are the scenarios of how this conversation or confrontation might lead to, and then you're giving them an idea and a picture of what it might result in. They feel instantly a lot more comfortable, and you can sort of push them a little bit more to confront. But even to things like, right, it's your turn to pitch, even though it's mine. No, you're pitching to the director now. I'm not saying a word. I'm just sitting here. I could defend you, and
So
I'll
you
jump in.
put them on the spot.
You put them on the spot, and you do it, right? And sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Let's be frank, it doesn't always work. But the fact that they're in that position, now they've gone through this 20 minutes, 30 minutes of a confrontation, the world hasn't ended, everything's fine. They got good feedback, and they got to experience something new. But one way to do it is to show them what the potential output could look like, what the scenario could look like, and just walk them through it. And the other one is just slowly nudging them into that deep end and telling them, swim, just deal with it, fix it. Or just tell them, I don't care how you get it done, just get it done. And come back to me with that result.
Now that you speak of that, I remember, like, it's all the flashback of, the training sessions I've had with you, where it's been like the same input all across, and I'm wondering, why is he saying this? Why is he throwing me in the deep end? But now it makes sense.
Yeah. Because the work that you guys were doing was really about being inquisitive, right? So I would push you guys to say, there's a reason why this is not working.
Yeah.
And then when you come up with a bright idea that seems very intuitive, what was I telling you? I was telling you, why hasn't it been done before?
Yeah.
Right. It's a great idea, but I'm sure someone else thought about it. So pushing their thinking that way is very rewarding for them, but also they learn a lot from the process.
Agreed.
And you want them to walk away with a process of how to go about things, not necessarily certain tangible things.
Did you have any clashes with the multi-generationals in your teams?
Yes.
Can you share, like, without mentioning names?
Like I've clashed.
Not Krupa.
The whole list of I hope so. Example.
No. So I've clashed with previous managers, directors who are were at the time much older than me. And obviously I was younger and more naive, and I didn't see their point, but I just always struggled with that level of authority. Someone telling me how to do something in a certain way. Doesn't work. My mind just rebels against it. Even if I don't show it, I insist that my work presents it presents that rebellious side. I challenge the order. I still do what they want me to do, but I just do it in a different way. Right? And I know, and I realize how much of a pain I was to a certain extent with someone.
Because now you're leading a team, right? And they're doing that to you.
No, I know I was a pain back then. And I still did it because, look, for me, I knew what he wanted to do, what he or she wanted me to do. I just wanted to do it in a certain way that I thought was good because I wanted someone to validate what I was thinking about. And I think I wasn't getting that directly. I wanted to still do it. If someone had done that, maybe I would have just said, you know what, I'll listen. But I think they were fantastic managers, but of course not all of them. But I wanted someone to validate that, and I could only do it if I put it on paper or if I put it to work.
I think that's a really important point because, again, going back to sometimes the old generation is stuck in their ways, right? But you can still reach the same outcome, maybe even better, but just through different approaches.
Correct.
And I think that's definitely something our generation and the old ones need to start adapting to.
Correct.
That it's not just the way we know it
100%.
and the way you know it. There is a whole other way we can reach a better outcome or the same through the different mindsets.
Correct.
So
Definitely.
Another simple example. I got introduced to Airtable 2 years ago.
Yeah.
Airtable was around for a longer time than that, and I just didn't get exposed to it. And I'm someone who prides myself in finding solutions online. But I sent my junior to come up with a way to do something collaborative online with an Excel-like format. I told him, just go figure it out. So I was telling him, go do it in Excel, but online. He just went ahead and found Airtable. And he just created the whole thing for me. And I was just scratching my head thinking, I felt ashamed of myself first. And second of all, I'm like, show me how it's done. And you realize it's not about telling him how to do it.
Of course. It's
just go get it done.
Allowing them to do. I mean, this raises a very important question for Darine in terms of like policy making, right? Like, in your opinion, what would, like, speaking specifically about Gen Zs, like, what role would they play in policy making around sustainability or AI or technology? I know, like, they are part of different forums, but what do you think, in your own opinion, would be their role for the future?
It's a multiple of things, but it's voicing their concerns. Like I said earlier, that we create these policies for their future. In the end of the day, they are the future generation, the future leaders of the world. So it's giving them a platform for them to voice their concerns, to voice what they want their future to look like. I'm sure what I wanted 10 years ago is very different to what I want for the next 10 years. And that's why, as I said earlier, it's not a new phenomenon to have the younger generation as part of policy making. It's been done for many, many years.
Right.
And I think we'll continue to do so.
Is their voice really heard?
Definitely.
Because they could be voicing that but then we go back to like old policies because we're used to doing that. So is it like really true that they are part of something that is creating a change or trying to create an impact, or like we're really listening to their vision and probably giving the right advice for them on what they're probably foreseeing?
I mean, definitely depends on the industry that you're developing the policy for, right? But if particularly social policies, I would say, based on my experience being in the UK, definitely they're a great part of the focus groups that we do. But yeah, it really depends on the industry that you're doing it for. It wouldn't apply to every industry, like an oil and gas, for example, or tech, telecommunications. So specific industries, I would say yes, they're very much involved. Yeah.
Here, your future is bright.
Of course.
Inshallah. No, we'll make it bright. How to.
Yeah.
But having said that, we at the Z-Way, we are building for impact across generations, and that's pretty much written at every messaging point that, we could touch base upon. But what's your personal commitment, or what's your professional commitment, whatever you would, like to answer to, towards building this impact across generations and making the future truly something that's diverse, making something where we can flex our generational diversity and be like one big family living happily together, no more clashes, no more stereotypes, labeling, something that's a bit more collaborative, a bit more impactful? Where do you see the white space, and how do you feel that you can yourselves address that white space?
Well, I think that's easy for me because I'm quite lucky to be in a career or an industry where I'm part of shaping the future, right? So I always say to people that when they ask me what policy is, it's very much the fundamental tool that helps you, the evolution of society. So my commitment is to stay in policy and to support that shaping the future, a brighter future for everybody. But also, I think a big part of it, I think everybody would say this to you, is the sharing of knowledge and the mentorship. And that's critical. And like you said, it works both ways. It's not, mentorship doesn't just mean me, teaching the younger generation. I'm still learning a lot from the older generation as well, and from the younger. So yeah, that's my commitment. You can hold me against it.
So you're living the Z way.
Yes.
First, I agree with the slogan. I think it's that it's a very niche area, and we were talking about this about it outside.
Thank you.
And to your point, Darine, I think it's a continuous learning from different generations. But obviously recognizing that there's a certain, it has nothing to do with age as much as it has to do with the type of experience that someone has gotten and what you want to learn from them. And I tell my team this all the time. We have a way at DFF where resources are quite shared. So it's a very flat organization in a sense. So I could be working with my team most of the time, but I will get other resources and I'll end up working with others as well. And I tell them that's a fantastic way to do this because when I was in PwC, the selling point was that, you have so many lines of service you can get exposed to, but realistically, everybody's very, siloed. And obviously, every organization is siloed, but with us, it's a lot less so. So they get to work a lot with different teams. And I tell them, go learn, attach yourself to this person. So I think learning across generations and different management styles is very crucial, extremely crucial, because you also grow up not just learning from different generations, but also learning different management styles, right? Different even colleague types, peers. 100%. How do they work? How do they function? How can you get the best out of them? Yeah. Because that level of cross-learning really brings out that it makes you aware of your own skills, but also hones it. So a leader emerges a bit faster, right, with leadership skills. If you have a certain type of aptitude, it comes out a bit faster as well. So they need to not just learn from different generations, but also different management styles across. That's very important. You learn how to manage and how not to manage. Yeah. It becomes glaringly obvious.
What not to do is
what to do and what not to do. Yeah.
I agree. I completely... Yeah.
And just to add to that, just putting maybe the generation side a little bit on the side, beyond that, it's recognizing that every single member of your team, depending on the generation or background or whatever, each person has their own strengths and weaknesses. And as a good leader and a good manager, it's bringing out the best and nourishing that, but also, you know, highlighting the weaknesses and helping them develop, you know, no matter what the age or, you know, how old we are. But
And for Ghaith, your commitment would be to always drive cross-learning?
Yeah, for myself.
Like if I hear you correctly,
yeah,
like
from myself and from my team.
okay.
Yeah, so it's not just across generation, but across different management styles and different work styles as well.
so for somebody who's driving learning across generations, somebody who wants to drive policies for the generations, we feel that the future will be brighter.
Yeah, we are in safe hands.
Hopefully.
Fantastic.
No, but with that, we are towards the end of, you know, the serious talks. Let's move to the rapid fire. Just lighten up the mood a bit before. Hopefully, it's lightening up, not kind of making it
Darine is
controversial.
excellent.
Yes. We're gonna ask you like a bunch
this
of
isn't
questions.
live, right? We can edit this.
Yeah, we can edit this, but we're gonna ask you like probably Krupa will ask you all the questions. I'll ask the same questions to Ghaith afterwards, and then we'll do that.
Do you want to start with Ghaith?
No.
I answered the first question. You will take this.
Great.
What's one app that you can't live without?
Oh,
I can say that, but on your behalf.
it's really bad, and it's Instagram, and it's really bad to say. I'm sure there are so many other different great apps out there, but yeah.
Are you sure it's not
Perfectly
YouTube?
fine.
Yeah. I'm very old school like that, by the way. I don't have any of those music apps. I still use old school YouTube.
I can't live without Spotify.
Yeah. I don't use Spotify. I don't use any of that. It's really bad.
Also,
But Instagram, but not purely just for tutorials and stuff like that. But there is loads of news. There's so much to learn on Instagram. So yeah, that's my top
It's
one.
the new mode of consumption. Like we can't skip it for sure. Well, if Dubai were a tech product, what would its tagline be?
If Dubai?
If Dubai were a tech product, so it's a tech app, a technology by itself, anything that's... Or let's say if Dubai were a startup,
Okay.
what would its tagline be?
Oh, I'll give this one to Ghaith.
It's a good one.
I need to call a friend for this one.
He's gonna go back. Ghaith is gonna go back with a lot of ideas.
No, it's a good one. I would say if Dubai was... I think it's closer to a tech... It's constantly reinventing itself. I would say it's called sort of like AI, where it just got resurgent again and again and again. For now, I would call it AI for sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. What's your go-to guilty pleasure when you need a break from work?
I would go back to the app question. And mine has been TikTok. And I'll tell you why, because that algorithm has helped me really come up with lists that are fantastic. If I want to find new music, it's on TikTok. If I want to learn about something new, it's on TikTok. A new recipe to cook, TikTok. The content there is unmatched, completely unmatched so far. It used to be YouTube. Now it's this.
Yeah,
now
the
it's TikTok.
algorithm is fantastic in its own ways, for sure. What's a surprising skill or a hobby that you have picked up recently?
Oh, God, you make me sound so boring. I am trying to learn very badly Italian.
Oh, me too.
Really?
Yeah.
Me too.
So yeah, I know she has this
We have the
loving for
same.
Italy as well.
Yeah.
My dream is to retire in Italy someday, and the closest I can do right now is just learn Italian. So and eat Italian food. So
Yeah, me and Darine, we have like the same teacher. Yeah, she gave me the contact. Excellent. If you could work on any futuristic project, real or imaginary, what would it be?
Oh, that's for me?
Yes.
So this is one of the projects I'm pitching right now. So Dubai has had those national champions basically that they've invested in, and the DPs of the world, the Emirates of the world, and that was a good fit from then until pretty much now, and they're still successful and they're going to be successful. But I guess the question mark now is what's Dubai going to offer for the new economy that we're experiencing? I think that is something I'm super interested in. Yeah.
can I give you mine?
Yes, please.
I think
if you could work
I'm
on any futuristic project, real or imaginary, what would it be?
Yeah, I think I'm done with Earth. I'd like to explore space, something on the space side, definitely.
Nice.
I think it's literally a whole other world for me, and I don't know enough about it. So I think I'd say, in the space world.
Yeah.
That would be my answer to the hobbies.
The hobbies.
Yeah.
You want to just go like become an astronaut and just chill there.
So if you ever want to get into like proper astrophysics and all that, there's like obviously the known names of Stephen Hawking and all these guys, but Brian Cox is a fantastic professor / lecturer. Neil deGrasse Tyson is one of those guys who was able to take a very dense topic and make it very relatable. I've read almost all of his books that have come out. Definitely worth a read. He has a very worldly perspective on life in general because of that.
Wow.
And he makes a very strong argument about how by looking at the cosmos, we've throughout history learned a lot more about ourselves, the earth, and we've progressed and we've learned a lot about everything we know about right now. And he makes a very strong argument for that. So
Very
the next time your friend says, we should explore the oceans and not space, it's like, no, we should do both. And you could prove to them that by looking at the stars, we've figured out a lot about our
Of course, of
That's really
course.
interesting. I'll check it out. I worked
a great
for a little
perspective.
bit on space policy, and it's just so
fascinating.
interesting. So
It's fantastic. Yeah.
Great.
These are not so rapid as they sound.
that's our fault.
Yeah.
What's a tech trend or policy idea you think will completely change the game in 10 years?
A tech trend.
Or a policy?
The thing is, I'm really not good with trends. I'm not on TikTok. I'm
like-
only on Instagram, nothing else.
Maybe
So I'm not the best person to ask
cars
about
that
it.
drive themselves.
Yeah, I have mixed feelings about that. I mean, would you feel comfortable getting in a car that drives itself?
In
I
10
don't
years,
know.
I probably
Yes.
would.
Yeah.
Not
Yeah,
now. In
maybe.
10 years, I
Yeah.
probably would.
Self-driving cars.
Interesting.
Give it time to kind of
Yeah.
get perfected.
Let it be practiced.
Yeah.
I think I don't know. I'm again. This is me speculating, but maybe like the metaverse. I would say I don't know. Or maybe it's because I foolishly can't wrap my head around it. It could be completely different in the
that's
future,
personal.
but
That's your
it's
own-
yeah
that's
my
your
own
own
my own
question.
opinion.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If it's going to take 10 years, which I doubt, I think space travel. And I'm not talking to other galaxies. I don't think we're going to be there yet. But
Yeah.
at least
Really?
at least to like Mars, commercializing that, I think it would be
The Milky
really
Way,
cool.
yeah.
Yeah, I'd definitely jump on that.
What would be one thing that Gen Zs bring to the table that no other generations bring, other than energy? You said energy.
The exposure that they've had from a very young age to all these changes has built them in a completely different way than we were built. To be honest, we're still adapting to these. I can't keep up, to be very honest with you. So I would say their ability to adapt
Yeah.
is going to be very, very useful
Very
for the
agile.
future.
Yeah,
Yeah, very
cool.
agile.
I would say optimism and hunger.
Oh,
Like
wow.
they're a lot more optimistic, I think, about the world than we are.
Yeah.
And it reminds me of a time when we were as optimistic
Yeah.
as well.
Yeah.
Vis-a-vis the older generation. I think that's something that characterizes them quite a lot.
I confirm that because what I learned from all the reverse mentorship that I've had with the Gen Zs was like, if this solution doesn't work, there's always other solutions. Like, why are you worried? Like, you shouldn't worry.
Yeah.
That was
Just
kind
chill.
of my learnings. Yeah. That was not as rapid as we thought. You guys we have someone from the government, someone from the policy. This was
The
like
older generation do things slower, guys.
the non-rapid questions. No, but that was amazing. We would like to thank you for your presence.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you
Thank you for having us.
for showing up. Thank you for actually being part of. To us, it's more than a passion project. It's just like trying to genuinely create a platform and space for conversations and intergenerational dialogues that are gonna make a difference and possibly inspire leaders, young generations, older generations to make an impact. So we would like to really thank you for your commitment
Thank
you
and
for
for your
having us.
time
Yeah.
and for your experience.